Run, my son, die free. South Carolina, Beaufort County, May 1857. Night fell over the Ashford plantation, dark and heavy. Elias ran through the forest. His bare feet were bleeding. The roots cut his skin, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Behind him came 10 hunting dogs, huge animals, trained to chase people. The barking filled the forest. Along with them, 3 men on horseback shouted orders and carried lit torches. Clint Hargrove was the plantation owner's son. His arm was broken, bandaged. Elias had broken that arm 3 nights before. The reason was simple. Clint was beating a 12-year-old girl. Elias couldn't stand to see that. He rushed forward, struck the overseer, and ran. Now they wanted revenge. Along with Clint came Buck Tisdale, a famous hunter who never returned without his prey, and Samuel Colt, a cruel man who preferred the whip to weapons. Elias knew he would die if they caught him. It wouldn't be quick. It would be slow and painful. The moon hid behind the clouds. The forest was pitch black. Elias ran until he saw the swamp ahead. The water was dark and smelled bad, but it was his only chance. He entered the freezing water. He sank up to his neck. He stood still, breathing slowly. The dogs reached the shore, barking like crazy, but the water hid his scent. The torches approached. Elias saw the lights dancing among the trees. Buck shouted that Elias had entered the swamp. Clint ordered the men to surround the area. He said Elias would pay for what he did, that he would suffer. Elias remained motionless, only his eyes and nose above the water. He waited. The men divided the dogs and moved away, looking for other paths. Hours passed. The freezing water burned his wounds, but he didn't move. When the sounds of the horses disappeared in the distance, Elias came out of the water. He was shivering from cold, but alive. He looked north. He knew that far from there, 300 kilometers away, there was a border. On the other side of that line, they said men could be free. Before we continue this shocking story, tell me which city you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Let's keep going. His father had died on that plantation 15 years before. Before dying, he said only one thing. Run, my son. Die free. Elias never forgot those words. Now, soaked and bleeding, he looked at the darkness ahead and began to walk. The forest was large, the dangers were many, but he had something the dogs and men didn't have. He had a reason not to give up. 3 days earlier, the sun had been setting over the cotton fields when everything changed. Elias had been working since dawn. His back hurt. His hands were raw from picking cotton all day. He was walking back to the slave quarters when he heard screaming. It was coming from behind the main house. Elias stopped. He knew that sound. Someone was getting beaten. He should have kept walking. That's what everyone did. You kept your head down. You stayed out of trouble. That's how you survived. But then he heard a child crying. Elias walked toward the sound. Behind the house, he saw Clint Hargrove. The overseer had a young girl by the arm. Her name was Sarah. She was only 12 years old. Clint had his whip raised. The girl was crying, begging him to stop. He brought the whip down. It cracked across her back. The girl screamed. Something inside Elias snapped. He didn't think. He just moved. Elias ran forward and grabbed Clint's arm. The overseer turned, shocked. Nobody ever touched a white man. Nobody. Clint tried to pull his arm free, but Elias held tight. Then Clint swung at Elias with his other hand. Elias blocked it, then twisted Clint's arm. Hard. The crack was loud. Clint screamed and fell to his knees. His arm was broken. For a moment, everything was silent. The girl stared. Other workers who had been watching from a distance stood frozen. Elias looked down at Clint, then at his own hands. He knew what he had just done. He knew what it meant. Elias didn't wait. He grabbed a sack, filled it with whatever food he could find in the kitchen house, and ran. He ran toward the woods before anyone could stop him. Behind him, he heard Clint screaming for help. Men were already gathering, dogs were barking, but Elias was already gone. Into the darkness, into the forest. He knew they would come after him. He knew what happened to people who fought back. He had seen it before. His own father had fought back once, 15 years ago. Elias had been 25 years old when it happened. His father, Marcus, was a quiet man who worked in the plantation stables. He was good with horses, better than most of the white handlers. But Marcus had a secret. He could read. Nobody knew how he had learned. Maybe from a kind master years before. Maybe he taught himself. But he could read, and he taught Elias in secret. Late at night, by candlelight, they would practice letters in the dirt floor of their cabin. One day, the old master died. His son took over the plantation. The new master was cruel. He worked people harder, beat them more, sold families apart without thinking twice. Marcus started teaching other people to read. He whispered to them about places up north where black people were free. He read them newspaper stories about abolitionists, about Frederick Douglass, about people who had escaped and never been caught. Someone told the master. They came for Marcus at dawn, dragged him out of the cabin. Elias tried to fight them off but was knocked down. They beat Marcus in front of everyone. Then they built a wooden structure in the yard. Before they took his father, Marcus looked at Elias one last time. His face was bloody, but his eyes were clear. He said just those words that Elias carried with him every day since, the words that made him grab Clint Hargrove's arm when he saw that girl being beaten, the words that pushed him into the forest toward freedom or death. Now Elias moved through the darkness after leaving the swamp. His feet were cut and bleeding, tree branches scratched his face, but he kept moving. He could still hear the dogs in the distance, fainter now, but still there, still hunting. He thought about Sarah, the young girl. He hoped she was okay. He hoped they didn't punish her for what he did, but deep down he knew they probably did. That's how it worked. When one person fought back, everyone paid. That made him angry, but it also made him more determined. He reached a small creek. The water was cold and clear. He walked in the creek for almost a mile. The water would hide his scent from the dogs, at least for a while. When he finally climbed out, his legs were numb from the cold. He opened his sack. Inside was some cornbread, dried meat, and a small knife he had grabbed from the kitchen. Not much, but it was something. He ate a little bit of the cornbread, drank some water from the creek, then kept moving. The night seemed endless. The forest was so dark he could barely see his own hands. He stumbled over roots, walked into low branches, fell twice. But each time he got back up and kept going. As dawn approached, the sky began to lighten. Gray light filtered through the trees. Elias could see better now, but that also meant he could be seen. He needed to find a place to hide, to rest. The dogs would be out again at first light. He climbed a small hill. From the top, he could see smoke rising in the distance. A chimney. A house. Elias's first thought was to avoid it. Houses meant people. People meant danger. But as he watched, he noticed something. The house was small. Just a cabin, really. And it sat alone. No other buildings nearby, no big plantation house, no slave quarters, just one small cabin in a clearing. Elias was exhausted. His body was shutting down. He needed rest, real rest. Not just hiding in bushes for a few hours. He needed food, water, a place to warm up and dry his clothes. He decided to risk it. He moved down the hill carefully, staying in the tree line, watching the cabin, looking for signs of who lived there. As he got closer, he saw a small garden behind the cabin. Vegetables growing in neat rows, a chicken coop on one side, a well in the front yard. Then he saw her. A woman came out of the cabin. She was black, maybe 40 years old. She wore a simple dress and a head wrap. She carried a bucket to the well, drew up water, carried it back inside. Elias watched for another hour. The woman came out twice more, once to feed the chickens, once to hang washing on a line. She was alone. No one else appeared. The sun was fully up now. Elias knew the hunters would be moving again soon. He had to make a choice. Stay hidden in the woods and keep running, or approach the cabin and ask for help. His body made the choice for him. His legs gave out. He collapsed against a tree. He was too weak to keep going, too cold, too hungry, too tired. He stood up with effort and walked toward the cabin. Each step was difficult. He felt like he was moving through deep water. Finally, he reached the door. He raised his hand to knock, but before he could, the door opened. The woman stood there, looking at him. She didn't seem surprised. Her eyes moved over him, taking in his torn clothes, his bleeding feet, his exhausted face. She knew immediately what he was. A runaway. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Elias waited for her to scream, to slam the door, to call for help, but she did none of those things. Instead, she stepped aside and opened the door wider. The woman didn't say a word, just gestured for him to come inside. Elias looked behind him, checking the tree line, then stepped into the cabin. The woman closed the door quickly, slid a wooden bar across it to lock it. The cabin was small but clean, one room with a bed in the corner, a table with 2 chairs, a fireplace with a pot hanging over it. The smell of cooking food filled the air. Elias's stomach cramped with hunger. The woman pointed to a chair. Elias sat down. His legs were shaking. The woman went to the fireplace, ladled something from the pot into a bowl, brought it to him. It was stew, vegetables and a little bit of meat. Elias wanted to eat it all at once, but he forced himself to go slow. His stomach wasn't used to real food anymore. The woman watched him eat. When he finished, she took the bowl, filled it again, brought it back. Elias ate the second bowl slower, feeling strength return to his body with each bite. When he finished eating, the woman finally spoke. Her voice was quiet but firm. She said her name was Ruth. She had been free for 10 years. Her former master had died and left her free in his will. It was unusual, but it happened sometimes. She had used her freedom to buy this small piece of land, built this cabin, lived alone, grew her own food, raised chickens, stayed away from towns, stayed away from trouble. But she knew what it meant when someone like Elias showed up at her door. She had helped others before, not many. Maybe 5 or 6 over the years. She couldn't turn them away, wouldn't turn them away. But she needed him to understand something. If he stayed here, they were both in danger. If the hunters found him, they would burn her cabin, take her land, maybe take her freedom, send her back into slavery, or worse. Elias started to stand up, started to say he would leave. He didn't want to put her in danger, but Ruth held up her hand, told him to sit back down. She wasn't finished talking. She said he could stay for one day to rest, to heal, to eat. But when night came, he had to leave. She would give him food, tell him the safest route north. But he couldn't stay longer than that. It was too dangerous. Elias nodded. He understood. One day was more than he expected, more than he deserved. He thanked her. His voice cracked when he spoke. He couldn't remember the last time someone had shown him kindness. Ruth told him to rest. She pointed to the bed in the corner, said he could sleep there. She would keep watch, wake him if anyone came near. Elias wanted to argue, wanted to say he would keep watch so she could rest, but his body betrayed him. He could barely keep his eyes open. He walked to the bed, lay down on top of the blanket. The mattress was thin, but it felt like heaven compared to the ground. He closed his eyes. Within seconds, he was asleep, He dreamed of his father. They were back in their old cabin. Marcus was teaching him to read by candlelight. His father's voice was patient and kind, teaching him letters, teaching him words, teaching him that knowledge was power, that a man who could read could never truly be a slave. Even if his body was in chains, his mind could be free. In the dream, Marcus looked at him and smiled. He said he was proud, that Elias had done the right thing, that standing up for that little girl was what made him a man, not just a worker, not just property, but a man with dignity and courage. Then the dream changed. His father was standing on the wooden structure in the yard, the rope around his neck, but he wasn't afraid. He looked at Elias and spoke those words one more time. "Run, my son, die free." Elias woke with a start. His heart was pounding. For a moment he didn't know where he was. Then he remembered. Ruth's cabin. He was safe. For now. He sat up and looked around. Ruth was at the table, sewing something. The light coming through the window was different. Lower. It was late afternoon. He had slept for hours. Ruth looked up when she heard him move. She said he had been sleeping for almost 6 hours. She had checked on him a few times, made sure he was still breathing. He had slept so deeply she worried he might never wake up. Elias apologized for sleeping so long. Ruth shook her head, said he needed it. His body needed to heal. She had prepared more food for him, and she had something else. She went to a trunk in the corner, opened it, pulled out men's clothes, a shirt, pants. Both were old but clean. She said they belonged to her husband. He had died 3 years ago. Fever took him. She had kept his clothes, didn't know why. Maybe for a moment like this. She told Elias to change. His wet, torn clothes would give him away. These dry clothes would help him blend in, make him look less like a runaway. Elias took the clothes, went behind a curtain in the corner to change. The clothes fit reasonably well, a little loose, but that was better than too tight. When he came out, Ruth nodded with approval. She had also prepared a bundle for him. Food wrapped in cloth, a small knife, a tin cup, a piece of rope. Not much, but more than he had before. Then she sat him down at the table, pulled out a piece of charcoal and a scrap of wood. She drew a rough map, showed him where they were, showed him the rivers he needed to cross, the towns he needed to avoid, the safe houses where he might find help. She said there was a Quaker family about 30 miles north. They helped people heading for freedom. Their farm had a red barn with a white X painted on the door. That was the sign. If he could reach them, they would help him get further north. But the journey between here and there was dangerous. There were patrols on all the main roads, slave catchers with dogs, bounty hunters looking for rewards. He needed to stay off the roads, travel only at night, hide during the day. Ruth also warned him about something else. Not all black people would help him. Some were afraid. Some had been threatened by white folks. Some worked as informants to protect themselves. He couldn't trust everyone just because they looked like him. Elias listened carefully, memorized everything she told him. When she finished, he asked her a question. Why was she helping him? She had said herself it was dangerous. She could lose everything. Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke. She said when she was young, before she was freed, she had a son. He was 8 years old. The master sold him, sent him down to Georgia. She never saw him again, never knew what happened to him. Every day for 20 years, she wondered if he was alive, if he was safe, if someone was helping him. She said when she saw Elias at her door, she saw her son. Somewhere out there, maybe her boy was running too. Maybe someone was helping him. She helped Elias because she hoped someone was helping her son. That's how it worked. You helped when you could. You paid it forward. You kept hope alive. Elias felt tears in his eyes. He didn't try to hide them. He thanked Ruth again. told her he would never forget her kindness, that if he made it to freedom, he would find a way to help others, just like she was helping him. Ruth smiled. It was the first time he had seen her smile. It changed her whole face, made her look younger, happier. She said it was almost dark. Time for him to go. The later he left, the more dangerous it became. Elias stood up, picked up the bundle she had prepared, put on an old hat she gave him. It would help hide his face. Ruth walked him to the door, unbarred it, opened it a crack and looked outside. The sun was setting. The sky was red and orange. No one was in sight. She opened the door fully. Before Elias stepped out, Ruth grabbed his arm. She looked him in the eyes. She told him to be smart, be careful, trust his instincts, and remember that freedom wasn't just a place, it was a state of mind. Even if his body was still in the south, his spirit was already free. No one could take that from him. Elias nodded, then stepped out into the evening air. He looked back once. Ruth was standing in the doorway. She raised her hand. Not quite a wave, more like a blessing. Then she stepped back and closed the door. Elias walked across the clearing toward the tree line. When he reached the trees, he looked back one more time. Smoke rose from Ruth's chimney. The cabin looked peaceful and quiet, like nothing had happened, like a runaway hadn't just spent the day there. He turned north and started walking. His feet still hurt. His body was still tired. But he felt different, stronger, more hopeful. Ruth had given him more than food and clothes. She had given him something more valuable. She had reminded him that he wasn't alone, that there were people who cared, people who fought back in their own way, by opening their doors, by sharing what little they had, by keeping hope alive. Elias walked through the forest as darkness fell. The moon rose bright and full. It lit his path. He moved quickly but carefully, always listening, always watching. The sounds of the forest surrounded him, owls hooting, crickets chirping, small animals moving through the underbrush. He walked for hours. The forest eventually gave way to farmland. He skirted the edge of fields, stayed away from houses, kept to the shadows. Once he saw a group of riders on a distant road. He dropped flat in a ditch until they passed. His heart pounded the whole time, but they didn't see him. As midnight approached, he reached a wide river, the Combahee River. Ruth had told him about it. He needed to cross it, but it was wide, and the current was strong. Elias walked along the shore looking for a good place to cross. Finally, he found a spot where the river narrowed slightly, where rocks stuck up through the water. He took off his shoes, tied them to his bundle, then stepped into the water. It was cold, so cold it took his breath away. He moved from rock to rock, testing each one before putting his full weight on it. The current pulled at his legs, tried to sweep him downstream, but he held firm. Halfway across, his foot slipped. He fell into the water with a splash. The current grabbed him immediately, pulled him under. He fought to the surface, gasped for air. His bundle was gone, swept away. All the food, the knife, everything Ruth had given him. But he couldn't think about that now. He had to survive. He swam hard toward the far shore. The current kept pulling him downstream. His muscles screamed, his lungs burned, but he kept swimming. Finally, his feet touched bottom. He stood up, waded to shore, collapsed on the bank. He lay there for a long time, coughing, shivering, cursing himself for being careless. Everything was gone. He was back where he started, wet, cold, with nothing but the clothes on his back. But he was across the river. That was something. One more barrier between him and the hunters, one step closer to freedom. He stood up, put his shoes back on his feet. They were still tied together around his neck. At least he hadn't lost those. He looked at the sky, found the North Star. Marcus had taught him how to find it, how to use it to navigate. As long as he could see that star, he wouldn't get lost. He started walking again, following the North Star. His stomach was empty, his body was exhausted, but he kept moving, one foot in front of the other. That's all he could do. Keep moving, keep fighting, keep believing that freedom was possible. Meanwhile, back at the Ashford plantation, Clint Hargrove was organizing another search party. His arm throbbed with pain despite the laudanum the doctor had given him. But the pain only made him angrier, made him more determined to catch Elias. Buck Tisdale sat across from him in the plantation office. The hunter was studying a map of the region, marking the areas they had already searched, marking the areas where Elias might be hiding. Buck said Elias had at least a full day head start now, maybe more. He was moving fast, staying off the main roads, using the rivers to hide his scent. He was smart, more resourceful than most runaways. But Buck wasn't worried. He had caught smarter men before, and he had the dogs, 10 of the best tracking dogs in South Carolina. Once they picked up the scent again, it was only a matter of time. Clint wanted to ride out immediately, but Buck talked him out of it, said they needed to be smart about this, needed to think like Elias. Where would he go? What route would he take? Buck figured Elias was heading north, toward North Carolina, maybe trying to reach the mountains. Or maybe trying to reach one of the safe houses run by abolitionists. There were rumors of such places, Quakers and other sympathizers who helped runaways. Buck proposed a different strategy. Instead of chasing Elias, they would get ahead of him, set up checkpoints on the main routes north, watch the river crossings, alert other plantations and slave patrols in the area, create a net, force Elias to either turn back or walk right into their trap. Clint liked this idea. He sent riders out to neighboring plantations, spread the word about Elias, offered a reward for his capture, $100, dead or alive, preferably alive. Clint wanted to make an example of him. By morning, word had spread throughout Beaufort County. Every overseer, every patrol, every slave catcher. They all knew about Elias. They all knew what he had done, and they all wanted that reward money. Elias didn't know any of this. He was still walking north, tired, hungry, alone. He found a thick grove of pine trees as the sun rose, crawled deep into the center, made a bed of pine needles, lay down and closed his eyes. But sleep didn't come easily. His mind kept racing, thinking about Ruth, about his father, about Sarah, about the long road ahead. He tried to quiet his thoughts, tried to rest, but every sound made him jump, every bird call, every rustling leaf. He was convinced the hunters were right behind him. Finally, exhaustion won. He fell into a fitful sleep. Dreamed of dogs and horses, of chains and whips, of his father hanging from a rope. He woke several times, heart pounding, sweat pouring down his face. Each time, he forced himself to lie back down, to rest. He needed his strength. When he woke for good, the sun was setting again. He had slept most of the day. His body ached all over. His stomach felt like it was eating itself. But he had rested. That was something. He crawled out of the pine grove, looked around carefully. No one in sight. He found a small stream and drank deeply. The cold water helped wake him up, helped clear his head. He needed food. He couldn't keep going without eating something. But he had no way to hunt, no traps, no weapons. He would have to forage, hope to find berries or nuts or something edible. He walked through the forest looking for food, found some wild blackberries growing on a thorny bush. The berries were small and not very sweet, but they were food. He ate as many as he could reach, stuffed his pockets with more for later. He also found some cattails growing near a pond. Marcus had taught him that you could eat the roots. He pulled up several plants, washed the roots in the pond water. They tasted like dirt, but they filled his stomach. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep him going for another night. As darkness fell, he started walking again. North, always north. The terrain was changing, more hills now, The forest was thicker, older trees. It was harder to navigate, but it also provided more cover. He walked all night, stopping only to drink from streams or to check his direction using the North Star. By dawn, he had covered maybe 10 miles, not as much as he wanted, but steady progress. He found another hiding place, this time a fallen log with a hollow center. He crawled inside. It was cramped and uncomfortable, but it was hidden. No one would find him here unless they were specifically looking. He ate the rest of the blackberries, chewed on some pine bark. It didn't taste good, but Marcus had said it could keep you alive if you were desperate. Elias was getting desperate. He tried to sleep, but the hollow log was too uncomfortable, too confining. He felt trapped, like he was in a coffin. He kept imagining the hunters finding him, smoking him out, or worse, leaving him to die in here. After a few hours, he couldn't take it anymore. He crawled out, even though it was still daylight. Even though it was dangerous, he needed air, needed space. He sat with his back against the log, hidden in some bushes. From here, he could see a long way, could see if anyone was coming. He tried to relax, tried to rest without sleeping. That's when he heard them. Dogs far away, but definitely dogs, barking, hunting. Elias's blood ran cold. They had found his trail. They were coming. He stood up quickly, started to run, then stopped himself. If he ran now, in daylight, he would be seen. He needed to be smart, needed to hide, needed to throw them off his trail. He looked around frantically. There was a stream about 50 yards away. Water. He could use the water to hide his scent again. He ran to the stream, jumped in, started wading upstream. The water was shallow, only ankle deep in most places. But it was flowing. It would carry his scent away. He walked in the stream for over a mile. His feet were numb from the cold, but he kept going. The barking seemed to be getting closer, or maybe it was just his imagination. He couldn't tell anymore. Finally, he climbed out of the stream on the opposite bank, walked on rocks when he could, trying not to leave tracks, trying not to leave a scent. He found a dense thicket of mountain laurel. The branches were thick and tangled. He forced his way into the center. Thorns tore at his clothes and skin. But he didn't care. He needed to hide. He sat in the center of the thicket, perfectly still, barely breathing, and waited. The barking got louder, closer. He could hear men's voices now, shouting orders. The dogs were on his trail. Then the sound stopped. Elias held his breath. What was happening? Had they lost the trail? Or were they right outside the thicket, waiting for him to move? Minutes passed, felt like hours. The silence was worse than the barking. At least with the barking, he knew where they were. Then he heard something. A dog. Close, very close, sniffing. Moving through the brush. The dog came into view, a huge bloodhound, its nose to the ground, following his scent. It was heading straight for the thicket. Elias's hand moved slowly to his pocket. He had no weapon, nothing to defend himself. Except, he remembered, the small knife Ruth had given him. It was gone, lost in the river, but he still had the piece of rope. And his hands. The dog reached the edge of the thicket, started to push through the branches, its nose leading it right to Elias. Elias waited, muscles coiled, ready. The dog broke through the last branches, saw Elias, started to bark. Elias moved faster than he thought possible. He lunged forward, grabbed the dog's jaws with both hands, clamped them shut. The dog thrashed, tried to bite, but Elias held firm. He wrapped the rope around the dog's snout, tied it tight. The dog couldn't bark now, couldn't bite, but it was still fighting, still trying to get free. Elias didn't want to hurt the dog. It was just an animal, doing what it was trained to do. But he had no choice. If the dog got free, it would alert the others. They would find him. He held the dog down, used his weight to pin it. The dog struggled for several minutes, then slowly stopped fighting. Its eyes looked at Elias, not with anger, but with something else, almost like understanding. Elias loosened his grip slightly. The dog didn't move. They stayed like that for a long moment. Man and dog, both just trying to survive. Then Elias heard voices. Close, very close. The hunters were looking for the dog, calling its name. Rex. They were calling for Rex. Elias looked at the dog. At Rex. He made a decision. He untied the rope from the dog's snout. But he didn't let go. He looked the dog in the eyes, whispered to it, asked it not to bark, asked it to just let him go. He didn't know if the dog understood. But slowly, carefully, he released his grip, backed away. The dog stood up, shook itself, looked at Elias, then did something unexpected. It turned around, walked back out of the thicket, started barking, but not at Elias. It was barking in a different direction, leading the hunters away. Elias couldn't believe it. The dog was helping him. Or maybe just confused. He didn't know, didn't care. He just knew he had to move. Now. He crawled out the other side of the thicket, stayed low, moved quickly but quietly. Behind him, he could hear the hunters following Rex, going the wrong way. Elias ran, north, always north. He ran until his lungs burned, until his legs gave out, until he collapsed in a field of tall grass. He lay there gasping, looking up at the sky. The sun was starting to set. He had survived another day, another close call. But he couldn't keep doing this. He was getting weaker. The hunters were getting closer. He needed help. He needed to reach that Quaker farm Ruth had told him about, the one with the red barn. He stood up, checked his direction, started walking again. He walked all night. Through fields, through forests, around farms and houses, always moving, always heading north. By morning he was in bad shape. He hadn't eaten anything real in 2 days, just berries and bark. His body was shutting down. He was seeing things, hearing things. His mind was playing tricks on him. He found a small barn, checked to make sure no one was around, then slipped inside, climbed into the hayloft, burrowed deep into the hay, and finally, let himself sleep. When he woke, it was dark again. He had slept through another entire day. His body had taken what it needed. Now he had to keep moving. He climbed down from the loft. His legs were stiff. His whole body ached. But he was alive. Still alive. He left the barn, started walking, and that's when he saw it, in the distance, maybe half a mile away, a red barn, and on the door. Even from this distance, he could see it, a white X. He had found it, the Quaker farm, the safe house. Elias wanted to run toward it, but he forced himself to be careful. He watched for a long time, saw a family moving around, a man, a woman, 3 children, all white. They looked peaceful, normal, like any other farm family. But Ruth had said they helped people. People like him. He had to trust her, had to take the chance. He waited until full dark, then approached the barn. He didn't go to the house. That seemed too dangerous. Instead, he opened the barn door, stepped inside, and waited. An hour later, the barn door opened. The man from the house stood there, holding a lantern. He saw Elias, didn't seem surprised. The man spoke. His voice was gentle. He said he knew why Elias was here, that he was safe, that they would help him. He asked if Elias was hurt, if he needed food. Elias tried to speak, but his voice wouldn't work. He just nodded. The man smiled, told him to wait here. He would bring food and water, and later, when it was safe, he would take Elias to the next station, closer to freedom. The man left, came back with food, bread, cheese, cold chicken, and a jug of water. Elias ate slowly, savoring every bite. The man watched him, then said something that made Elias's heart soar. He said Elias had been very brave, very strong. But the hardest part was over. From here, the network would take care of him. Other conductors, other safe houses, all the way to the north, to Pennsylvania, to freedom. Elias finished eating, looked at the man, asked if it was real, if freedom was really possible. The man smiled, said freedom was more than possible. It was certain. As long as Elias kept going, kept believing, kept fighting. That night, hidden in the Quaker's barn, Elias slept better than he had in years. For the first time since he broke Clint's arm, he felt hope. Real hope. He was going to make it. He was going to be free. And somewhere in the darkness, Ruth was thinking about him, praying for him, hoping that her son, wherever he was, had found someone to help him too. That the network of kindness and courage that connected them all would bring them all to freedom eventually. The dogs were silent now. The hunters had lost the trail. And Elias, the man who had stood up for a little girl, who had broken his chains and run toward freedom, was one step closer to his dream. The night was dark, but somewhere ahead, dawn was waiting, and with it, a new life, a free life, the life his father had dreamed of, the life he had fought for, the life he deserved.